What do you think it'll take to get it done?
Well, well, I think a cultural shift will be the big one. It's going to take lots of money. Unfortunately, the forests were logged, and all the gravel and dirt that was up on the mountains has all been washed down into the creeks. And of course, the creeks are now running under 10 feet of gravel. What do we do about that? How do we get that 10,000 years of dirt development, soil development back up on the mountain slopes? You know, these problems haven't been addressed, and until they actually have people working in the field to find ways to do that, they will never will be. You know, there's practical problems that have to be solved. Mm-hmm. And of course, the money that was made with all that timber that was cut, it's all spent and gone.
Yeah.
So now we have a broken down system and no money to fix it. It's a problem.
So there is it will take an investment of money, and it will also, from what you're saying, take a scientific study of how you get rid of some of the things that are now compromising the ecosystem, or adapt the ecosystem so that it can bring back as much of the functionality as it once had.
Sure, it's going to take science, but also take those practical geniuses that live amongst us who get out there and do things and prove what can be done and what can't be done. We need a lot of those people too. So we need people actually working out in the field, doing restoration, and then the interplay of the information, the warehousing and the sharing of information so that we all learn how to do things better, what works.
Which is also part of what you do in your work, is trying to gain that knowledge about what needs to happen to restore the creek. I know you have training in the restoration of natural systems, so you have some expertise. Are you working with traditional knowledge as well in the work that you do from the First Nations perspective?
One of the things we're missing on our project is a First Nations component, and I know I've talked to First Nations people about it, and it's just a question of putting it together. But we don't have that. There's a midden at the mouth of the creek, so we know there is some cultural history there. So we have some old photographs from the turn of the century, First Nations people with some canoes pulled up on the beach right in front of the creek. So it's just a matter of putting that together. Maybe when I retire finally, I'll have some time to do that and make those connections. I mean, it's part of the vision. We need to make this place, we need to learn some things from First Nations people. We really do. In our culture and in our society, we're missing some things.
So you talked earlier about there is a need for full-time work on this. And you're a volunteer on this project, and I imagine that most of the people, other than the parks people, are volunteers. How would we need to approach the need for restoration differently to recognize it as an economic driver and a worthy recipient of jobs that are paid so that people can be engaged in environmental restoration as a technical and scientific-based activity that is needed as part of our society's mix of jobs?
Well, that's a tough question to answer. I don't really have an answer for it. I mean, you could think of some things. Maybe you could tie the runs to certain aquatic ecosystems. A percentage of those could be tied to creating money for the work that happens in the streams, things like this. I mean, but I don't have any answer. I don't have the printing press in the basement to make the money, unfortunately. But I think that that's one of the things that will have to happen. But in our culture, it isn't always money, although a lot of times money is important. But some things people do value more than money. And I think this is the whole thing about reassessing salmon on the coast here, and the benefits that it brings our ecosystems, our cultures, the food benefits. I think that if we start to think about that a little bit more, perhaps, we're prepared to spend some more money. Maybe a little less on pavement.
Kind of repair the economic system that needs to accompany a change in the restoration so that we get our salmon back.
So we have money for overpasses, and we have money for all kinds of things. Mm-hmm. Why don't we have some money for to repair some of these salmon streams? And then, of course, once we have all these fish back, and there was a lot of fish at one time, more than there is now. All those mom and pop operations, the trollers and the little canneries, also, little smokehouses, like you say, the slow food, local food movement can bring some of that back. And that's economic employment for people, and it's food.
Yeah.
So it's, very positive.
Yeah. And getting back to a more traditional fishery would be good for BC as well, instead of these great big industrial ships that go out and sort of have massive amounts of fish in their hold when they return.
So only a few people get the money from that. But we need to switch it back a little bit so that more people get some of that money. That's shared around, and it drives the economy, right? Small business. Everybody's all about small business. Well, salmon can provide small business as well, wild salmon.
Yeah, a big economic opportunity as we grow this. Now, you talked about using carcasses. I assume that must mean that you've got eagles and other creatures coming back into the ecosystem that might have gone with the salmon.
I haven't seen a lot of eagles, although there are perches along the beach. I don't know if you spent much time down on the beach at Mount Doug Park, but there are eagles there. But what we have seen a lot of is mink and otter. A couple of years ago, before the carcasses were even thawed, and because they're frozen when we get them, the mink was all the way up from the beach right through the Ash Road culvert, almost at the top of the stream, eating those carcasses. So they're around when the fish are around.
Oh, good.
Yeah, it's great.
Must be exciting.
Yeah, it's good.
So the Green Party is about looking at what the provincial government level could do to support people that are actually implementing solutions to problems, and where the things that they're doing are successful. And so what's your sense of what the provincial government would need to do in order to support groups like yours you're one of thousands of groups that are working to restore streams and rivers and to restore habitat and to bring back salmon throughout British Columbia? I mean, this is a kind of the unsung heroes of the salmon movement. So, what do you think the provincial government could be doing?
Well, the provincial government needs to do some more. They need to put some more money into restoration for sure. And restoration in British Columbia, I think, is still in its infancy. There's a lot of trained people out there, but there's not much work for them. I think we need to put some of those people to work. So a little bit more money into the salmon enhancement, and strategic. So a place like Douglas Creek, we're never going to produce, if we got a sustainable run for us would be 100 chum. And so, we'd put out maybe 60,000 fry, and they would go out into the ocean and, support the ecosystems that are out there. So you wouldn't want to spend a lot of money on Douglas Creek, and we're not asking people to do that. Our needs are modest, and we'll do them through volunteers and stakeholders. But the bigger systems that are producing a lot of fish, and maybe some systems, the whole 5 species, let's put some money into those, and let's move upstream in areas where people don't normally go and try and restore some of the headwaters so that the lower reaches are in better shape and support more fish. Let's do that. I mean, there's a number of streams around that could use that kind of care and attention. Some of the stuff on the west coast, the Kennedy River watershed, there's lots of streams over there that could be big producers, and there's people over there that need work and people who know how to do it. Let's put that together in the big systems and spend some money and get some fish back. And
beneath that is the economic argument that if we restore these fish runs and we can create economic activity, that it's not just the employment that might be offered in the restoration work, but also that in the long term we see a return of a commercial or a sports or whatever fishery that can be an economic driver for BC.
Well, you're much more politically aware than I am, but yourself. Everybody knows what a generator sports fishing is to British Columbia. I mean, it creates employment for people. There's a lot of money spin-off on it. It's a huge resource, but if we don't have any fish, there's no sports fishing. So just in sports fishing itself, don't even talk about the commercial fleets. There's a huge amount of money to be made, and little towns to be supported, their hotels, their dining rooms, their souvenir shops, the transportation. it's all huge, and so the more people we have coming here fishing for salmon, the better off we'll be. Problem is, we don't have enough fish.
Right, and we do really need to work at bringing back the wild salmon. Or, I mean, I can't imagine BC without some sort of restoration of the 5 species of salmon in BC, because in some ways it's criminal what we've done, allowing our wild fish runs to disappear through the very activities that you've talked about, where we log and our creeks and rivers fill with gravel, and so we just destroy any possibility for salmon to find to return to their home runs.
Well, you know, salmon have a life cycle like everybody else, every other creature, and salmon, in terms of salmon, there's a freshwater component, and if there's no freshwater habitat, there will never be any salmon. And so we don't even have the luxury of having the moral high ground, because the 3 big impacts on salmon in British Columbia have been, well, perhaps 4. Urban development's a big one,
Yeah.
huge. Logging, mining, and of course overfishing has been a problem as well. So you know, we found the enemy. It's us.
Right, as with most things, that's
Yeah, yeah.
the unfortunate part of almost all of, you know, it's not just the degradation of ecological systems, but even our economy. I mean, we're our own worst enemy when we create an economic system that is completely unsustainable and that is subject to boom and bust, and that destroys jobs and families and all kinds of other things. But that's another rant for another day. Do you have any questions of the Green Party or any comments to make about what you would like to see us doing?
Well, I think what we're missing a few things in our culture, contemporary culture, but one of them for sure is a sense of how important the environment is to us, and some kind of reverence for the environment, and to revalue it, so that there's actually money attached to trees and shrubs and aquatic ecosystems, not just tires and cement and building supplies. So there is a lot. We need to look at the environment a different way, and I think that if your motif is green, I think that you're people who could bring that to us. Myself, I'm a shop steward at work, and I work in a union shop, and I think those are important things too. I think that people should get a share of what they produce, but certainly I think that the previous governments that we've had have just not come up to snuff as far as the environment goes. All of them.
Yes, and quite frankly, the Green Party has a reverence for the environment. We do have a series of principles, and they are based a lot in sustainability, biodiversity, diversity of all creatures, and so and we believe in that we must reform our economic structure so it values our environment. We have this kind of craziness where we've separated the two, and we all know that this is our home, and when we destroy our home, we've destroyed everything. And related to labor, we also believe in fair work, fair wages, and in work. I mean, it's crazy that we've almost created a culture where the only jobs that we create are low-level service jobs, which have no meaning. And so we do have to get back to the place where we're creating meaningful work in all kinds of forms. And so I applaud you for the work you do. I think that it's very important. I applaud you for your volunteer work. I think that without people like you who are knowledgeable and passionate about the environment and who know what needs to be done, we would have a BC that is way more impoverished than it is now. So I thank you very much for the work that you do and for participating in this interview. It's been great.
Thank you for the kind words.
Thank you.